No palco de vocês vão falar, venha Ceri, e vocês vão amar. Uma salva de palmas pra ele.
Até já.
Mata do coração.
Follow that. Oh.
That is a very
Difficult
difficult act to follow.
Do they know what they've done to us?
Yeah. Okay, so let's tone things down. Where do I click? Where do I click?
Right click.
Yeah, but where do I point? Over there?
Technical.
Technical, I don't know. Yay! Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Ben first.
Oh.
Yeah.
To introduce myself.
Yes.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. My name is Ben Goldstein, and well, I'm a materials writer, teacher trainer. I work at the MA. I teach on the MA in TESOL, the New School in New York, and I've published many books with Cambridge, including 2 handbooks, a book on images called Working with Images, and one on video, language learning with digital video. And very pleased to be here again with you, like last year. It's very nice to see so many familiar faces. So thanks very much for coming again to be with Cambridge here in Sao Paulo. And Ceri.
Okay, yes, I'm Ceri. I've been working with Ben for a long time, I think since the turn of the century.
Yeah, it's almost like we're husband and wife now.
Yeah.
So if you see us kind of, arguing during the talk, it's because...
You'll understand why, yeah. I've been writing with Ben, mainly. I'm also a teacher and a teacher trainer. Recently, I've been teaching teenagers, mainly. And the course that we most recently wrote together was a secondary course, which is Eyes Open or Uncover here in Brazil. Okay. But if you have a look at my name up there, I have huge problems wherever I go. No one knows how to say my name, okay? So how would you say it here in Brazil? Ceri's great. I like Ceri. I live in the south of Spain, and I'm Ceri in the south of Spain as well. But I also lived in Madrid, and in Madrid I'm Ceri. I also lived in Italy. Any ideas what I was in Italy? Ceri. Yeah, that's right. And what about Turkey? Any ideas what my name is in Turkey? Ceri, which of course makes us Ben and Ceri. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks very much, Ceri. We've got some ice cream waiting for you later. Okay, we're going to get a bit more serious now, and we're going to talk about, I think, a very serious topic in today's world. I'm not going to get too political, but it's not very difficult to work out that the world is getting, well, there are a lot of politicians who are encouraging a very isolationist policy, shall we say, and so I think, I'm getting a lot of noise on this, I'll move it away a bit. I think it's very important that I think global competence is, shall I move away from that? Okay. I think global competence is increasingly important in today's world, where isolationism is taking hold in some countries. So let's talk about what global competence is, what role it has for us as English teachers, and we're going to show you some practical examples of it. And I'm going to finish with a story about a student of mine, and which I think encapsulates a lot of the ideas about global competence. So let's have a look first at this rather complicated That's quite a lot of information to take in after lunch. I'm sorry about that. But if you just Google global competence, and you Google that with PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment, you'll get access to this PDF file. It's called Global Competency for an Inclusive World. And it's actually a very interesting document to analyze. It's actually becoming very important in today's society because PISA are basically working on introducing an evaluation for 2018 incorporating global competence for teenagers, so for 15-year-olds, the countries that are affiliated to PISA. So what is global competence? As you can see here, they divide it into three big areas. There's skills, there's knowledge and understanding, and those are the two big blocks that, of course, can be assessed, that can be evaluated. But I think what's interesting, the most interesting thing about it, are the attitudes here, the attitudes which we want our learners to adopt once they have engaged with these skills, knowledge and understanding. And so we'll be coming to attitudes that are expressed here: openness towards people from other cultures, respect for cultural otherness, global-mindedness, responsibility, and the values, valuing human dignity and cultural diversity are the central tenets, the central ideas behind global competence. In a sense, this is very similar to what was established many years ago, and it was then called global education. Kip Cates was the person who I first read talking about global education. It's quite uncanny how similar his definition of global education was in 2004 and the definition that's been established by PISA for global competency. The skills and the knowledge and understanding are virtually the same here as here. So I'm not suggesting this is anything brand new. We've always thought that engaging students with analytical and critical thinking, enabling them intercultural knowledge and awareness, we've been encouraging these kinds of things for some time. But I think, as I said, it's what's new perhaps is the idea that this leads to developing global attitudes of global awareness, cultural appreciation and respect for diversity and empathy. And these are really key concepts behind global competence, which, as I said, I think is increasingly relevant in today's world. So, we're going to look at some examples after the coffee break. Oi, wow, that was, Jesus. Yeah, that wasn't me, I don't think. Anyway, as you might know, if you've followed some of the work that I've done and that we've done together, we're also very interested in visual literacy. And so one of the ways that I've tried to make this big kind of umbrella term, global competency, a little bit more accessible for you is through images. So I'm going to establish two concepts here: visualizing the global and globalizing the visual. Okay, so let's think of this first idea, visualizing the global. We live in a world, there are big topics that we need to discuss, and often these topics are summarized with an image, or these topics or these concepts are made accessible by an image or by a series of images. Just give you an example. If I say to you climate change, if you think about the concept climate change, what image could be used or often is used in popular media to represent climate change? Any ideas? There's a lot of you here, but yeah. Iceberg melting. Anybody else? Could be floods. Yeah. Something which maybe is a more kind of popular image or a popular icon. Somebody said it, yeah. A polar bear, yeah. And this is an image from Getty. In fact, you can't see the polar bear because it's covered with the Getty Images logo. But that's a polar bear. Look at that image, how it's been, look at that photo, how it's been taken. You've got this big bare landscape of a melted glacier or icebergs, and the polar bear is all alone in this landscape. Do you think this image represents this problem well? We're too comfortable with this image. It's quite. You may not have been asked that question. But I think it's an important question to ask ourselves, because a lot of these issues and concepts are visualized in this way. And maybe that's not the best visualization. Maybe that doesn't accurately describe what is happening to the world. Maybe it's too convenient and too cozy for us. So perhaps another possibility could be this one. What do you see here? Yeah, you can see a glacier in the present, which is in the background, and a glacier in the past, and the glacier is much, much, much smaller now than it used to be. Is that perhaps a better or a fairer representation of the problem? I think it probably is, and there may be others that you can think of. But can you see what we're doing with this little activity? I'm just getting you to think critically about the way certain concepts, issues, are presented to us in the media. And this is something that I think we can do with students, and we'll show you some more examples later. Now I'm going to hand over to Ceri.
Okay, so Ben's images told us some stories there, yeah, that they actually talk for themselves almost. Well, we know the theme for today is stories. We've just witnessed a beautiful story. And I'm going to share with you a little personal story. But when I think it's personal to me, but I think it's probably quite universal. So I reckon that wherever we are there, on that world map, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a minute, this story could possibly play out the same. So, I'm a mum. I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and they're now 13 and 15, but this story happened about 5 years ago. Now, you know what kids are like. How many parents are there in the room? Loads, okay? So, for months and months, if not years and years, we've constantly got the same request from the 2 kids. They both have their birthday in the summer, so it would come up in the summer, and then again at Christmas, over and over. Mum, Dad, can we have a... Yes, exactly. You see, it is universal. We want a dog, we want a puppy. No, we can't have a dog. Sorry, we live in a flat, we live in the middle of town. Takes too much time. Who's going to look after it? Who's going to walk it? You know the excuses. You've been there? But one day, I was in the kitchen, and their dad comes in and he says, "Do you know what? I think we can have a dog." I secretly wanted a dog all along, so I was really pleased. But we decided that we were going to surprise the kids. Yeah, we weren't going to let them know, because we wanted to choose a dog. We went to a rescue center. We visited the center. You know what that's like, so many dogs wanting a home. And I'm quite embarrassed to say that we chose the youngest, prettiest dog. We should have chosen an old dog, you know, one of those shaggy ones with their teeth sticking out that no one's going to give a home to. But we chose a puppy because the kids wanted a puppy. But we didn't tell them. And we went away on Christmas holiday, and we came back in the new year, and I went off to pick her up. And their dad says, "Oh, Mum's just called, and she said, can we go and meet her on the beach?" Meet her on the beach? Why? Why should we go meet her on the beach? Can't she just come home? "Oh, no, she wants us to go meet her on the beach." Okay. And he's finally persuaded them to come down to the beach. And there I am with a dog. And my daughter goes, "What's that?" And I go, "It's a dog." And she goes, "Oh, but whose dog is it?" And I said, "It's your dog." And what did she do? Yes, she just burst into tears. See, that's universal as well. So, and my son, you know, he's macho. He didn't cry. But his jaw literally dropped. Exactly, but physically, like that. Amazing. I can still see it in my mind's eye. So that's a story, I think, that shows us that all over the world, kids are kids. Yeah? So let's go back to the world map. Horrible quality photo. I really apologize. It's because it was taken on my phone, and it's a map that's in my kitchen. So the picture really doesn't come up very well on a large screen. Does anybody here have a map of the world in their home? Yeah? Quite a few in your classroom? A few more? I love maps. And I think the map of the world is a great starting point for getting kids aware of where they are in relation to everything else. Anybody here have kids who are gamers, who play online? Yeah? A couple, not that many. Students who are gamers and play online? Yes, okay. And you know these... where they play together, and they could potentially be all over the world. Well, my son was playing with some boys in Argentina, and I was listening in, as you do as a mum, and they were talking to each other on Skype at the same time as they were playing the game. And my son, for some reason, said, "What time is it with you?" And of course, it was morning in Argentina and afternoon in Spain. And he goes, "Why aren't you at school?" And he said, "Well, it's the summer holiday." But in Spain, it was the middle of winter. And it was wonderful to he just went, "Oh, of course." And he'd learned that at school, but had never been real to him until he'd heard it from someone else. But not someone else who's a teacher, but someone else who's a kid. And so that inspired me to start using exercises and activities in class where we get the kids to start thinking about time zones. No? Yes. Okay. So, here we go. What time zones have we got here? A familiar one? Yeah, okay. Excuse me. So, here in Sao Paulo, you could ask kids to find 3 cities that are behind in time. Find out what time it is. Then think about, okay, so what time is it here now? Genuine question. Okay. What time is it in London? It's 4 hours later. Yeah, so what are people doing at that time? Probably having dinner, no, having supper, getting supper ready, going to the cinema, I don't know, whatever. Yeah, it's the evening. And so get the kids to think about, well, if what are kids doing all over the world in those different time zones? And so we put it into a book. And this is the lowest level, the youngest kids, talking about time zones.
Oops.
That's okay. And so they talk about what they're doing, but what other people are doing all over the world. And you can go, okay, where are people sleeping now? Oh, right, okay, they go and have a look at the map. And they have to physically refer back to the map all the time. And so they're constantly placing themselves on the map. And that helps them to grow an awareness of everything else that's around them. Back to Ben.
Okay, thanks very much, Ceri. And what Ceri's been talking about are very practical applications of this idea of global competence, looking at a very simple idea for basic teens or very young teens, a kind of awareness of the world clock and the things that people are doing at different times. And there's a video here about a day in the life of a boy in Cairo, for example, for students to get an idea of these students, of these other people's lives and how they lead them. Let's go back though to this concept that I introduced earlier, visualizing the global. Do you remember this idea of the iceberg and the polar bear conceptualizing or representing the concept of climate change? But something else is happening in the world, and that is the power of images online. And images, some images, those images of the polar bear, those images are created by the media to help us conceive of a particular problem or issue or concept. But very often, we see images completely images which are kind of just accidental, that go viral, yeah? That become suddenly incredibly popular, incredibly visible through the internet because they go viral. Here is an example of a story. Do you know the story? Yeah. And yet this story, the original photo was taken of this boy in Afghanistan who was captured. I don't know whether it was his father or a member of his family who took a photograph of him in Afghanistan. Obviously a family of very limited resources. He didn't have the money for a football kit. He played football like many kids around the world. Then when he wrote Messi on it. And this image, how many of you have seen that image before? Yeah, quite a few of you. And that is because the image went viral. It appeared in social media, it appeared on the internet. And then the story is that Messi himself found out about this boy, and they actually met in a match in Qatar, in actual fact. So this is an example of globalizing the visual. In other words, this viral image, there are increasingly more of these kinds of images. When any big event happens, it could be something good or something bad, it could be anything in the world, any incident, there's always somebody there taking an image, and who knows which of these images is going to go viral and therefore tell a universal story. So we're going to do a couple of activities, a couple of task ideas now, focusing on this issue of visualizing the global and globalizing the visual. And we're going to look at exploring places, first of all. I'm going to show you an image now. Okay, I want you to have a look very carefully at that image. If you've seen that image before, has anyone seen the image before? Okay, if you have, can you be quiet? Don't tell your partner. I'm just going to give you a little task to do. I want you to look at this image very, very carefully. Okay, it's another example of an image that went viral. And I want you to think about these questions. Where is this place? What are the people doing? In order to answer those questions, you've got to rely on your prior knowledge of the world. There are a few visual clues in that image that may help you answer that question. And then how do you know? What's the evidence? They got a microphone, or I think a microphone for them. Is there a microphone for the audience? Yeah. Oh. Okay. I would normally give a class a lot more time than that. We've got lots of images and things to talk about, though, so I want to move on. Anybody like to say? Anyone like to give an opinion very quickly? Where is this place? What are the people doing? How do you know? Put your hand up if you'd like to, and Katya will try and find you. There's a chap there. Yes, there's a person there? Okay, you can shout out, can you? Yeah. Can you really scream? Because it's a very big room.
There's a mic on the way. Hold, just a second. There's a mic on the way.
Yeah. The mic's not on. No, you just need to turn it on. You just need to switch the mic on. Mexico. Okay.
Yes.
Because of the beer. She's saying it's Mexico because of the beer. The Tecate, okay, is a brand of beer. But how many people knew that in this room? You have to have prior knowledge. If you're Mexican, it helps. Okay, any other visual clues to tell you that? Are there any other visual clues? Okay. Okay, some guy says, what's your name? Paolo, he's saying it could be the border. Why do you say it's the border? The bus? Okay, but there's a bigger clue, isn't there? This. And what are the people doing? What are the people doing? Okay, so these people are playing volleyball on the US-Mexican border, and they're using this border as the net. Yes, that's absolutely right. And in actual fact, they've been doing this since 1979. And they call it volleyball, yeah? And this is an article about it. And it's in Naco, Arizona, and Naco, Sonora, right on the border. Can you see that image today has enormous significance, doesn't it? I'm not going to, you know what I'm talking about. Huge impact. It makes a bigger impact today because of today's political situation. But for our students, if we want to use an image like this, what I'm doing with this image, and as I said, Nick is going to follow up later talking about images and stories, is actually get students to think critically about this story, this image, this story surrounding the image. So the next question, I think, is a really important one. We've established what is going on and how we know that, but now what would be the next question? I think the next question is this one. How does it compare? So is there anything surprising or unusual about it? That's the next question, isn't it? What's unusual about it? They're playing volleyball on the border, and that is not normal. Yeah? And how does it, and the next one's even more important, how does it compare with other images of such places? That's where you really have to think. How many images of the US-Mexican border have you seen in your lives, online, in Wikipedia, on television? Yeah? Are they like that image? No. They're much more like this. Yeah? So, or this. Or this. These are images from Wikipedia, actually, which one would imagine, well, me innocently would imagine would be a kind of neutral site or objective site for information. So in other words, that image that we've just seen, the reason it's surprising and the reason, when thinking critically about it, the reason that it makes an impact is because it is a very positive image, yes? And we are accustomed to seeing images of this particular border in very negative ways. Images like this, which emphasize the height of the wall, the border, the difficulties in getting over it, the sheer size of the landscape and the difference between the two different sides of the border. So can you see what we're trying to do here? I think this is a task which encourages that kind of global competence, gets thinking critically about the world, and then seeing what the consequences are of looking at images like this. But then what we need to do in global education, Kate says, the next step is the action that we need to take with students. And that is, the final aim is to think globally and act locally. So it's this concept, the glocal concept. So in other words, the next step you could do with your students is to say, okay, Brazil borders onto many different countries, doesn't it? Many different other countries. What do those borders look like? Have you ever seen images of them? Can you visualize them in your mind's eye? Can you see them? What are the people like living on those borders? And then take the global and then take the local and then go global and show other borders. For example, this is the opposite of a border, isn't it? It's a bridge that links two countries, the opposite of the Mexico-US border, because it's a freeway that people can go freely from one country to the other. Does anyone know where this is, by any chance? It's in Europe. It links Denmark and Sweden. Okay, it links Malmö and Copenhagen. No, yes. Okay. Over to Ceri again. Another image, another powerful image.
Okay, so again, we've been looking at images telling stories, and this image tells a story. Do you think it's going to be a happy story or a sad story? Okay, everyone thinks it's going to be sad. Let's have a quick show of hands. Anybody think it might be happy? Ah, there are some optimists out there then, okay. Who thinks it's going to be sad? The majority, okay. So, I'm not going to give it away yet. But I'd like you to look at what you can see in the image and the possible symbols that there are. It's a very simple image, but there are a lot of symbols packed in there. So very quickly with a neighbour, just share. Okay, sorry. Chrysanthemums have a particular symbolism in the south of Spain. Do they have a symbolism for you in Brazil? Yeah, what is the symbolism of a white chrysanthemum? They're funeral flowers, no? Or they're flowers that you take to the cemetery, yeah? Okay. So, we have, the chrysanthemum is white. What does white symbolize? Peace. Purity. Anything else? New Year's Day, yeah, okay, right, yeah. Innocence, maybe? Yeah? Okay, so we take all of these symbols, and you see a beach, and you see the waves just washing up onto the beach, and there's this one white chrysanthemum. I need to tell you that the one white chrysanthemum is actually one of many, many, many chrysanthemums that were on the beach. So before I tell you this sad story, I'm afraid it's a sad story, could you just quickly, with your neighbour again, confirm what you think the story might be? Okay? I'm not quite going to tell you yet, but this photo was in the local newspaper. I think we can shield kids from these stories, but we can guide them through the stories. And even though it's sad and sometimes it's difficult, I think we need to help kids talk about these stories. So this was the story, and we did talk about it. And although it's a very sad story, there is a positive side to it, because there was a massive response from the community. And one of the ways the community was able to respond and show empathy, and this word was there on the chart from PISA, and I think if, you know, everybody here works with teenagers? Yeah, okay, so one of the things we know about the neurological development of teenagers is it's a time when they are developing the capacity to empathize. And it really helps if we can give them examples and situations and contexts where they can practice empathy. So in this case, the whole community practiced empathy by going to the beach and distributing white chrysanthemums. So, very quickly, here's the story. Okay, so a very sad story of one small child, but a symbol of a much larger story, and one that my local community, where I live, really took to their hearts. And so even though it was a very sad story and a difficult subject to talk about, there was a positive side to it as well. And all of that through the picture of the chrysanthemum.
Ceri. I'm going to show you one more image. I think one of the things about using images like this is that they often, a strategy that's often important in class is to make the familiar unfamiliar. So that image of the border of Mexico and the United States that I showed you, one of the reasons that it's powerful, one of the reasons it has impact, is that it's a familiar place that is given an unfamiliar it's a vision, an unfamiliar, a surprising, and in that case, a very positive image of a familiar place. So that making the familiar unfamiliar. Here's another example, a fun example, but also a very politically important image. We know what the rainbow flag now signifies, yeah? It's an icon for the LGBT community. And yet we are accustomed to seeing these colors, this icon. Perhaps we'll see it in the shop window or in a bar to indicate that the people there are, it's a gay-friendly place or something like that. We're not accustomed to seeing it painted on the road like that. And it's difficult for you, isn't it? Perhaps when you see the image like that, you're trying to think, so why would anyone want to do that? Where is that place? And that's what gives, again, this image great power. This is in actual fact outside the Russian embassy in Helsinki, in Finland. And some LGBT groups went and, the group in Helsinki went and painted the zebra crossing in the rainbow colors to protest against anti-gay legislation in Russia, in Moscow. Outside the Russian embassy in Helsinki. So again, I think that also is an interesting example of the kinds of images we see, the way that people represent their ideas visually. Just a few more practical ideas before we wrap up. And here is a fantastic quote, I think, from Pulvinus and Tomlinson. And they talk about the whole way that we present cultural information, whether we present this cultural information through text or through image or through video. One of the problems with the materials that we it is just cultural information. And what they say is, I'll just read that part in bold, learners are not required to respond to it in terms of their own experience or integrate it into new structures of thought and feeling. And they refer to the small culture of the classroom. I really like that definition of the community that you form with your learners and yourselves, this kind of small culture. And that they are saying that the subculture or this small culture does not get addressed. So what I'm going to show you now are a couple of little very small practical ideas that you can do with your students that touches on, I think, this idea of the small culture of the classroom. So a couple of ideas. The first one is my culture collage. I live in Barcelona, in Catalonia. It is part of Spain, but it is very different in Spain from Spain in many ways. I walk down the Ramblas. The Ramblas is. Anyone been to Barcelona? Yeah, some of you have been lucky enough to have been there. I walked down the Ramblas not long ago, and I actually bought this postcard from a newsstand on the Ramblas. I bought the postcard for a reason. I couldn't believe that this postcard was being sold in Barcelona, where I live. And the reason for that is because these icons, these images, are stereotypical images of what Spain is. And they are reinforcing a cultural stereotype to the tourists who buy a postcard like this. For example, this bullfighter here, bullfighting has been banned in Catalonia for many, many years. The image of the bull is an icon which you can see in many parts of Spain, in the countryside, on the highway. They've also been banned in Catalonia, where I live. Sangria, this is the drink that only tourists seem to drink, yeah? Nobody local seems to have this drink, and so on. These are the windmills of the famous La Mancha, the area of the center part of the Meseta, the peninsula, which is famous for this Don Quixote story, and so on. In other words, if you were from Catalonia and you walked down the Ramblas and you saw this postcard, you would feel quite offended, I think, that this postcard represented your community. So one very quick idea is to say to students, okay, what images, think of 6 images or 9 images, what images represent your community, your culture, your city? And here is an example Ceri's going to talk about from another city in Spain.
This is an example from a city in the north of Spain that we use the task there. The students choose their own montage of images of how they would want to represent their own city. There's a really neat little tool online called Mosaic Maker. Does anybody here use it? Or have you heard of the website Big Huge Labs? No? Okay. Well, there you can make all kinds of kind of neat images really easily. The mosaic is one of them. You feed in the URL of the images you want, or you add your own images, and up pops a lovely little mosaic, which the students like to create because they feel quite proud of the end product. So this is one end product that the student felt very proud of. There are some typical things in here that I think most students like to add. There's some food. Have you spotted the food? Yeah. There's a sport. Which sport do you think it might be? Football, of course. Yeah. And so on. A monument, some typical streets. This is what this student chose to represent their city, Bilbao, in the north of Spain, in the Basque Country. Now, before we look at the next, we're choosing a mosaic for Sao Paulo. What would you choose? What images would you want to include in there that would show your Sao Paulo? Not that stereotypical image like the one that Ben showed of Spain, but what would be your images that you would want to add in there for Sao Paulo? With a neighbour, very quickly, just discuss 3 or 4 you'd like to include.
I don't know. Okay, I'm going to show you a mosaic of Sao Paulo created by a student. And what's interesting, before I show it to you, I think what's interesting about it is it includes some stereotypical images, but it includes others which need explaining. And I think that's the interesting thing about this task. It's not just that the students produce it, which is easy to produce, as Ceri said. You can make your own photos, you can create the mosaic online. It is what you do with what you do with it afterwards that's interesting. And we often forget about this in the digital age. We can create this beautiful mosaic or something, but then we forget, how do we generate language around that activity? So how is the student going to explain why they chose those images? Why are those images representative for them? And that's where the language learning takes place, yeah? Not creating it, but actually explaining it, feeding back on it, and so on. And so I wonder if any of these images are the images that it's going to be controversial. I'm sorry, it cut off a little bit at the top there. But I remember you will probably disagree with these images.
But everybody's mosaic is different.
Yeah, everybody's mosaic is different, and that's what makes this activity fun. Very simple idea. get students, no, I disagree with you. I think this image represents, we've got food again. Things recur. When you give this idea to students, certain things recur. Football often appears, food appears, architecture, nature. But I remember the student who created it, she explained it to me. Certain things are self-explanatory, and actually certain things perhaps are Brazilian, like Havaianas. Yeah? There's a particular, but she said, no, there's a particular shop that's amazing in Sao Paulo. There's a particular Havaiana shop that is, and she said, I really love going in there. And then she explained, this is arriving in Congonhas. This, for me, is a Sao Paulo experience. Arriving in Congonhas and seeing all these apartment blocks. You'll feel like you're flying into somebody's living room. So, you see what I mean? And sometimes the images can have a negative connotation as well. The images don't have to be positive. The whole idea of a postcard is that it's positive, selling the city. I think it's very important that students choose images which are important for them, whether they have a negative or a positive connotation. Yeah? So it's a very simple idea, but I think a nice one. Final task before we wrap up. My culture should be kind of a question mark, really. I live in Barcelona, as I said. Barcelona is a bit like Rio. It's a very much a tourist city, and so there's lots and lots of English everywhere. Wherever you go in Barcelona, there's English. And so one idea is, we call this the linguistic landscape. Yeah, it's been referred to. Linguistic landscapes are changing all the time. The role of English is changing all the time. The world is more and more plurilingual. You'll see more and more languages coming together, both in conversation in the street and visually in signs and so on. This is a menu for a bar called Mosquito, and I counted 4 different languages that are being used in that menu. So again, a nice activity, a nice ethnographic activity to do with students is to get them go out into Sao Paulo, take images of English, yeah, and then analyze, why is English being used? Is English being used correctly? What is the effect of that English being used on their culture and on their community? Is it a positive impact, a negative impact, or so on? So again, these are all little ideas. These are my own photos, yeah. You even find English in Barcelona on the napkins, yeah. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense at all, yeah? Happy people apartments, very strange English, yeah? The sort of English that you find where I live. This is so you, yeah. Yeah. And a shop that is called, it reminds me of something, very weird. And I think this is an example. I don't claim to many things, but I think I'm not sure I coined this definition, but it seems to me that it makes a lot of sense, of thinking about culture with a capital C and with a small c. A capital C is that traditional way of transmitting culture, providing knowledge in the form of information, often from an outsider's perspective. That is the equivalent of the España postcard, yeah? This is a postcard produced by somebody else for somebody else. It's a series of cultural stereotypes. And what we want to do with students is encourage reflection, understanding of this knowledge, but from an insider's perspective. And that's where the learner's role becomes much, much more important. Culture with a small c, I like to call that. So, what we've tried to do in this talk is to really get to grips in a practical way with this concept of global competence. To analyze these issues critically is very important. I hope we've shown you today some ways that we can do that, especially using images as a convenient way to do that. To understand then how these differences affect perceptions and judgments, and then to engage in open, appropriate, and effective interaction with others. As I said, for the purpose of respecting human dignity and diversity. So as I said, if you're more interested in this is going to become more and more important, I think, in our curricula. Then you can check out this document online, the PISA document, Global Competency for an Inclusive World. I'm just going to finish with a couple of stories. One story that I'm very proud to, I think, to have helped produce, and that is something I read many years ago in the Guardian newspaper. It was called Born Everywhere, Raised in Britain. And I think it sums up, I think this sums up a little bit what some of the things Ceri and I have been trying to express today. It's basically an example of it's a photojournalist report on many different children who were born in countries around the world, but were raised in the UK, raised in Britain. And what this journalist did, what she did was she photographed all these kids. They interviewed a kid from every country in the world, and then she just quoted them, she interviewed them, and then in her photojournalist report, you have the photograph, the portrait, and the text. And these are really lovely texts. And we actually published them in English Unlimited. I asked the editor, I said, we were writing English Unlimited Advanced, the C1 level. And I said to my editor, I would really like to include these texts in the Unit 1 of this book. And my editor originally said, yes, but the problem with these texts is they're not written in standard English. Sometimes they're a mistake. Authentic voices, these are voices of people who exist, and maybe they don't speak standard English necessarily, and maybe there are one or two errors, but that doesn't matter. They are expressing something that's important to them. And I don't know, there's lots of interesting observations here from these kids. 11, there's a guy here from Brazil, a girl from Ivory Coast. Look what she says. In Africa, if you see anyone walking around, you just say hello. But in England, if you see anyone and say hello, they will not say hello back. They have to get to know you properly. When I arrived here, I was saying hello to everybody, but they wasn't, see the English? They wasn't answering me back. So I stopped. I tell myself there's no big deal me saying it again. But these are very poetic little observations. Some are happy, some are sad. But I just think they're beautiful texts. And that at quite a high level, because this is advanced now, are talking about, imagine living in another country, how easy would it be to adapt to that country and to to adopt as well their values and beliefs, their habits and so on. So just I think a very profound example. Ceri has one other example like this that she's going to share with you.
So this is a much more recent one. Obviously, the example that Ben's just shared, it's still out there online if you want to find it on The Guardian. You want to go to the authentic source. But this is a much more recent one from the end of last year. And you can see they're playing this nice little trick with turning 16 in 2016. And it's very, very similar, but basically it's lots of stories of 16th birthday parties from all over the world, how 16-year-olds celebrate. And it's the same thing, the voices of these teenagers. So it's really nice to be able to take voices into the classroom for teens from teens. So they're reading something which is much closer to them. And there's some great stories in there. There are some funny stories. There are some sad stories as well. There's one Syrian refugee who's saying how his 16th birthday is quite different from how he thought it would have been. Okay, back to you, Ben.
Thank you. And to finish then, I think this quotation sums up everything we've been saying, and funnily enough, it connects so well with the theme of this conference, with this Cambridge Day, which Nick is going to continue as well, this focus on stories. And Moran, in his book called Teaching Culture, Perspectives in Practice, he actually says this: every learner has a distinct story to tell, and teaching culture is about constructing and hearing these stories. And I think that's hopefully what we've engaged in today. So it's now my turn to tell a story. And I'm actually going to tell a story, but I'm actually going to tell a learner's story. When Cambridge University Press here in Brazil asked me to think about a story, I suddenly remembered a WhatsApp message that I received a few months ago. And this is from a student who I taught in the 90s in Granada. I don't know if you were here last year, any of you. Some of you might remember that I spoke about teaching in the Centro de Lenguas Modernas of the Universidad de Granada. And I taught there for 10 years in southern Spain. And this is the patio of that university center. And I like to call this story From Learner to Teacher, and we're going to listen to a learner's story. I'm going to tell the story, but actually it's the learner whose story is interesting for us today. And the WhatsApp was this. This was the WhatsApp I received. I'm just sitting at home and I received a buzz, and I got this photograph. And this is the cover of Ceri and I's book. It's called Smart Planet. In Spain, it's called Smart Planet. Here it's called Uncover or Eyes Open. But in Spain, they have their own edition. And so I got this message, and the message says, rather enigmatically, I didn't even know who this was. I guessed who it was in the end. But it says, if I have to choose my course book by just looking at the author's names, a smile, he's trying to say, I think I'm going to use your book because I remember you as my teacher. And he says, it's been so long. Congrats, Ben, good job. I said, thanks a lot. And this is Enrique, who's the guy who sent me the message. But the story is not that. That's how I got back in touch with him. I remembered him very, very well from the classes there in Granada. He was a student that went from a quite basic level to a very, very advanced level. And I think he was in classes with me for many, many, many years. Year after year, he would be in class with me. So I asked him I wanted to know what had happened to him. I hadn't been in touch with him for 20 years. 20 years. But I remembered him very, very well. We established a very good friendship. So I asked him to tell his story. And he sent me an email. And I'm actually now going to let you read his story. Okay? I'll shut up, okay, for a couple of minutes. And I want you just to read what Enrique says. This is where I start crying. No. Can I go on? Yeah? And there's one more slide. I'm breaking, I'm getting emotional. No. And so what I think this story tells us, and I think it is related totally with what we've been talking about in global competence, is that when you teach, I was teaching English, I was teaching a subject, but clearly I was having an effect on Enrique, on his life, on his future professional life as a teacher, and also, as it turns out, a writer. And I didn't know that was taking place. Yeah? We make a difference. We don't realize it, but we make a difference. We teach English, but we also teach other things. And we also help our learners to consider another world, a different form of pedagogy as well. Notice that he was influenced in some ways by the teaching that we had together, the teaching and learning. It was a kind of symbiotic relationship. It wasn't just one way. He talks about the different roles of teachers and learners. He talks there about the struggle he's having in his current job because some of his colleagues perhaps don't agree with the way that he wants to go about teaching these teens. And I was very moved by this story because I think we do make a difference. We often don't realize the difference we're making. And we have such a responsibility in that respect. And it's really very gratifying and satisfying for me to see that some of those values and attitudes that I perhaps was able to communicate to him, he is now communicating to his students. And that makes me feel, well, it's a very nice feeling. And here is Enrique. There he is. as a mountain runner, and he's also a writer. And in fact, he is actually watching this, I hope, live. I got in touch with him today via Facebook, and I think I told him to watch the live stream from Spain, where it's about maybe 10 o'clock at night. I hope you're watching this, Enrique. Thank you very much for everything. And finally, if you want to get a version of that presentation, Global Competence, you can go to my website and you can download an abridged version of that a PDF version of the talk. And Ceri, would you like to say something about your site?
Mine's semi-dormant at the moment,
okay.
I'm afraid. But there are teaching ideas there. Basically, it's a collection of lesson plans and teaching ideas. Thank you very much. We'd now like to invite Kelly from Assessment to come to the stage.
Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
And this.
Yes, it's working.
Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Kelly Tavares, and I work at Cambridge English Language Assessment. In a minute, we're going to have the presentation here. But I'd just like to say that I'm very happy to be here. I'm doing one of the things that I love the most in my life, which is talking to teachers. And I had the opportunity, I've been here most of the day, and I got to talk to some of you already. And I'd like to invite you afterwards to come and pass by our table outside to say hi and learn a little bit more about our assessment programs, okay? Here we go. So, Cambridge English. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our language exams, okay? And also, since we're in a room full of teachers, of course we wanted to share with you some of the resources we have in terms of professional development, courses and exams for you teachers as well, okay? As many of you know, we're also, just like the Cambridge University Press, we're part of the University of Cambridge. We've been around for a little while, just over 100 years, specifically with assessments. Of course, the university has been around for much longer than that. We've been helping the world to learn and communicate in English, and we've developed and delivered over 50 million exams to over 170 countries since 1913, okay? This is our mission statement, and this is something that we believe in, and everything we do, this is behind that. We help people learn English and prove their skills to the world. And we say this because we develop resources and exams to help students and teachers do that. Okay. We also like to say that for every learner, we are with them every step of the way. Starting from our young learners, exams for primary students, the little ones, okay, all the way up to the proficiency level for young adults and adults. We have an exam for every stage of the learner's life, for every stage of their language development. I probably don't have to get into this into detail, but I'd like to present the Common European Framework here, just for you to know that all our exams are based on the Common European Framework. So from beginners to A1, all the way to proficiency in C2, all the exams that we develop are developed to help you assess your learning, your students' learning, against the common European framework so that it can be compared to anywhere they go in their life, okay? So we start with our young learners. This is a course that exams that were prepared especially with young learners in mind. They start about at age 7 up to 11. We like to encourage them to move through the ladder, starting with starters, movers, and then flyers. They're exams that are very playful, they're fun activities. If you go on our website, you can actually see exams of with the young kids, talking to the speaking examiner. It's very cute. It's not a high-pressure test. It's something that kids enjoy, and they're encouraged to move through the ladder. A natural next step, thinking about a school's environment or a certain age group up to lower secondary, would be for the students to progress in their language acquisition from A2 to B2. Also using our exams for schools. For A2 we have a key, okay. Preliminary for schools gauges the learner's outcomes up to B1, and then first for schools at B2. Remembering that all the exams that were developed for schools has the student's environment in mind, okay? So it's gonna be language and content that has to do with their environments, with their reality. It's all very age appropriate, okay? Now, our main suite of events were developed thinking of an adult audience, okay? We're still working with the common European framework. We're still talking about assessing the language development from A2 to C2, but now we have another suite of exams that is thinking of a younger, older audience, okay? So key, preliminary, first, advanced, and then proficiency will help you track your students' development in their journey from A2 to C2, okay? And of course, we're here talking to teachers, so we want to tell you about resources that we have for teachers. We have courses, we have qualifications, and we have a lot to offer you, and one big launch that we wanted to share with you here in Brazil. The Cambridge English Teaching Framework was developed with teachers in mind. It's a framework that helps teachers in their professional development. So using the framework, starting with the teacher who perhaps wants to do an initial exam that's beginning his or her career, which start with the foundation courses or qualifications. When they move along their professional path, we have a course or an exam that can help you on that path. We have TKT. Many of you are familiar with CELTA exams. We also have EMI skills for English as a medium of instruction, for working with bilingual and international schools, as well as higher education. And of course, we have an exam, a course, Train the Trainer, where teachers can help other teachers in their development. This is something new. It was just launched this year. It's a really great website. It's called the Digital Trainer. We know that there are a lot of digital options out there. I think there's so much information that we spend a lot of our time trying to curate the content that we find, and sometimes it's hit or miss of what we're using in our classroom. So what Cambridge English did was create this website that helps you, the teacher, become more familiar and more proficient at using digital skills. You can go onto this site, and with a quick test, you can figure out where you are within your digital skills, okay? So it's gonna measure you to see how familiar you are, how comfortable you are, and it's gonna suggest a learning path for you. It suggests some options for you to be able to become more familiar with digital options. There's some free training resources to explore. There's some really nice short videos or courses that you can access for free. Okay, so if you're wondering about a tool and you find this tool on the Digital Teacher website, you can take a quick class about it, watch a quick video to explain how to use that within an English language teaching environment. You can decide which digital products are right for you, and of course it's constantly being updated with the latest digital ideas and trends. It was just launched this year, and along with the site itself, which has all these resources for you, there's a Facebook page. I was just talking to the person responsible. They said that they have not promoted this Facebook page yet, and there are thousands of teachers already following them on Facebook. And the #2 country that has teachers already following this page on Facebook is from Brazil. So this is the official launch here at the Cambridge Day of this new website for the digital teacher. And don't forget to sign up and like this page on Facebook. Thousands of Brazilian teachers are already on there. And the good thing about following on Facebook, once you become familiar with all the content that's already there, if you go in once or twice a week or once a month, having this on your Facebook will alert you to all the new content that's available for you, okay? And of course, this is the main reason why we're here today. Many of you already use the wonderful Cambridge textbooks that are available for your classes, but maybe some of you aren't aware that many of these great course books, many of these great textbooks were already developed with Cambridge English assessment in mind. Wherever you see this catalog downstairs, there's some samples of books for you to look at. Whenever you see the Cambridge University Press and the Cambridge English Language Assessment logos together, along with this official branding, you know that it's the two teams of experts came together to develop a course book that will guarantee that is totally calibrated to the CFR. The Cambridge English Language Assessment DNA is also part of the course book. So at the end of each course book, at the end of each semester or year that you're using the book, there's going to be an equivalent exam that you can use with your students. And you can find this and you can tell the correlation just by checking out the logos on the covers of your books, okay? These are some of the books that are already available that are downstairs for you to see. Kids Box, Prepare, Compact, all of these books, the new launches and new editions of classic books that you're already familiar with, come with this co-branding. They come with the suggestions on how to use the exams within your classroom. And if you need more information, if you already use Cambridge books and would like to, and don't use Cambridge exams yet, you can ask us for help. We're going to be right outside the room here. We can help you understand how you can bring Cambridge English exams into your classroom, along with all the wonderful Cambridge University Press books that are already available. That's all I had to say today. I want to thank everybody for their attention. It's always a privilege to talk to teachers. And I also want to thank everybody who's watching online. I know some people couldn't make it here today, but there are hundreds of people watching online, so I want to thank them as well. And now I'm going to pass It's Thiago from Bill that's going to make an announcement. I think that you guys